Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, working at simplifying things in our lives, one day at a time, one simple step at a time. I'm your host, Michelle Visser. And in today's episode, well, you guys are going to really, just sit back and enjoy. It was a really fun talk with a friend of mine who is the co founder of a wellness brand that really works at teaching kids and families the true value and actual superpower behind real food. Haley brings us really intriguing insights into big pharma and big food, and it's just good stuff. But Haley mentions more than once about the value of pasture raised, grass fed beef. And before I bring Haley on, I just want to take a second to give you some insight into how it's really the perfect way to stock your freezer with the best quality meat, like Haley is talking about. Um, this is meat that you know the source of, which is so important in today's meat economy. We so often don't know where the meat is coming from. Often it's from China, but you can know the source and you can know that this is going to deeply, greatly nourish your body. And it's really the best beef that your money can buy. It's 100% grass fed, finished, it's regeneratively raised on rotating pastures. And this maybe is the best part for me. It is raised by a small family. They're small family farmers who genuinely deeply care about leaving the land better than they found it because they realize the value of that to everyone involved. And unlike grocery store meat, this beef, you can genuinely feel good about feeding your family. I think it's super cool that you can actually do a bulk beef share. Like it's the same idea as if you had a local cattle farmer that you could go to and say, I'd like to buy half of a cow this year or a whole cow or however much your family's going to need. And you can stock your freezer with the best beef for a fraction of the price. I love too that there's no mystery. Like they itemize on their website exactly what you're getting. And there's no hassle involved with like a subscription that you might have to cancel. And maybe the best thing is you don't need to wonder about what's going to be for dinner every night because you can have your freezer stocked with really good stuff. Um, Also, if you're not ready to commit to like a beef share, which I believe they go down as small as 1/8 of a cow, so you don't have to commit to a whole cow's worth of meat. But even if you're not ready to do a beef share, they have other options. You can go try a sample box, actually, just for my listeners as a special offer. If you go to soulyrested.com/beef, I will introduce you to this amazing family, their small ranch, the great things that they're doing, and you can snag this special offer. Well, today we are talking with Haley Scheich, and I am excited to have Haley on. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is an author and the co founder of My Superhero Foods, a wellness brand that teaches kids and families about the power of real food. She actually spent 10 years working at Pfizer and another 2 years in a master's in dietetics program before she woke up, as she says, to all the delusions of big food and big pharma and big ag. And she's on a mission to change the way we see food. And I've known you for a little while on Instagram and everything that you share. I'm like, spot on, Haley. So I was eager to have you on. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Michelle, and I echo your words of following along. Your stuff is so interesting. I'm learning a lot from you, and I think my favorite so far was the like all the good stuff you could do with dandelions, which was great. So
Yes.
I love your content as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I have some dandelions drying right now, and they make amazing additions to tea for all kind of medicinal reasons. So but I'm excited because I'm always on here on the show talking about real food, the value of real food, how we as adults can work at making a little bit more convenient, quote unquote. Also, why we need to realize that convenience is not the most important thing when it comes to our food. So that's what I'm always talking about. But what I don't talk about a lot is kids and how we can help kids because my kids are now adults and I am a grandmom, but they're still wee little. So it's not something I personally have really had to invest a lot into or think a lot about because when my daughters were younger, I didn't know the stuff I know now. I mean, Haley, I would be embarrassed to sit down and share with you what we used to eat from the time we woke up till the time we went to bed.
Mhm.
So I didn't have this knowledge when my kids were growing up. So I'm so excited to have you on because this I know is an area that you like really specialize in. And I want to really break down and I want you to help me understand now that I'm a grandmom, some things that I can really do to make real food more important to kids, I guess. Maybe important's not the word I wanna use, more natural to kids, like a more natural craving that they have instead of the processed junk that we want them to avoid. So so tell me, we were talking about Instagram. Your I know that your Instagram account is My Superhero Foods. How'd you come up with the name?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I think you're the first to ask me of that. And I just have to say, I totally grew up on the standard American diet as well. And I think at
Oh.
the time, like my parents, just like you were with your kids, were just doing the best that they knew how to do. And
Mhm.
way back then, I mean, thank goodness a lot of people have woken up to
Yeah.
kind of what's going on. But a lot of people just kind of trusted blindly. Like,
Yeah.
cereal is great. It's whole grain and it's all these essential vitamins in there. And
Of course.
butter is bad. You should be eating margarine. And it's like, you guys were just doing the best that you knew how to do. You were, my parents were. So I
Yeah.
grew up on the standard American diet too. And yeah, I just feel like a real change is coming and are starting to come when you look at 70% of a kid's diet is ultra processed foods. It's scary.
Wow.
It's really
Yeah.
scary, but I do feel like a lot of parents are really starting to see the bigger picture. And certainly that's what
Definitely.
my mission is to just educate kids and parents. And so, it starts with the kids. And I think you said it well. How do you like teach kids about real food or the importance of real food or motivate them to eat it? And I feel like
Mhm.
kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for. And so just simply having like a conversation of like, okay, let's look at what is in this food. Let's look at these ingredients. Where did they come from? What is red dye 40? What is guar gum? And then compare that to like, let's look at the strawberry that we just picked at the strawberry patch. Where did that come from? Well, we know.
Mhm.
So what do you think is going to be more like nutritional for our body? And just kind of getting them to think. And to answer your original question, where did my superhero foods come from? So my husband now, he's my second husband. And so we're a blended family, 6 kids. And when I met him, my 2 that I had with my previous husband were young. And, my husband, Tarek, he was like, "Wow, like, how are your kids eating, like, salmon and steak and broccoli? And, like, you don't really have, like, where are your goldfish crackers at?" And it's just he's like, "What's going on here?" And I didn't think about it at the time. I just thankfully had learned the information through healing myself before I had kids. So then when I had kids, it was kind
Mhm.
of like, well, this is the food we're having and this is what we're bringing into the house. But I didn't step back to really like think like, how do I get them to eat it? Because, when they go to the park, they see kids with goldfish. And what
Mhm.
I did just kind of intuitively that I didn't even realize I was doing is linking foods to like superpowers. So, at
Mm.
the time, my son was 4 and he loved playing like tag with his friends. And so I'm like, well, if you eat this grass fed beef, like it's going to make you run faster. And so that's kind of where the name came from. Like my husband and I, we kind of stepped back and we're like, this is information that, you need to teach other families. Like what you're doing is working. How do we like show this to other people? So I
Yeah.
credit him a lot for like, kind of jump starting this. And
I love
when
it.
we like sat back, we're like, I think we need maybe a kid's book. And just the my superhero foods kind of it just went with a theme of like kids can be superheroes. Like let's teach them like they can be if they eat the right foods. And so that's kind of where
Yeah.
the name was born. And
I love it. I did not know that it all started with your 4-year-old son way back when. That's great.
yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so before we dive into all the rest of the food, because there's so much to talk about, I also would love to know about your background with Pfizer. I know you mention it occasionally on Instagram, but I really haven't heard the story. So, what were you doing at Pfizer?
Yeah, so I was in sales, graduated with a business degree, international business and finance. Didn't use it for
Mm.
one day. It was actually what I ran into when I was a senior, and he's like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, Well, I don't really know because I've shadowed like every finance job. I just thought I wanted to go into it, but like nothing's
Mm,
really like nothing sounds good to me. So he's like, "Have you thought about pharmaceutical sales?" And at the time I hadn't heard about it.
mm.
I started to research it more and they said at that time it was actually harder to get into Pfizer than it was to get into Harvard. So I'm
Wow.
always like, I grew up kind of like middle class and I was very motivated of like, I'm going to make a lot of money and then I'm going to like take care of my parents one day the way that they have like really taken care of me because
Mhm.
we didn't do all this grandiose things, but I always felt loved and we always had the necessities and they taught me like to appreciate the small things. And I just was so like appreciative of that I'm like, I'm going to make a lot of money and take care of them one day.
Yeah.
So, you research pharmaceutical sales, you see that you can make a lot of money. And
Mhm.
to be honest, that's what I was 21 and that's what drove me. And I like a good
Yeah.
challenge. So I'm like, I'm going to go and apply for Pfizer. And it was a
Hmm,
long, tedious interview.
hmm.
Eventually I got the job, interview process. I got the job. 21, came out, and I drank the Kool-Aid from the start. I mean, I thought I was
Mm.
gonna change the world, and it's like, "Do you have a headache? I've got a pill for that. Do you have high cholesterol?
Yeah.
Lipitor." And it was just like,
Yeah.
looking back, it was such a brainwashing, like, experience. Like, you go into this
Mm.
training for, like, almost half of a year, and you're just, like, being video recorded of, like, you're doing, like, your sales pitch to the physicians.
Hmm.
The one good thing that came from it is that you were having these higher level discussions with physicians, and so you needed to know your stuff, and not coming
Hmm.
from like a biology or science background, I learned a ton about just pharmacology
Interesting.
and just all that. So I am grateful for that, the different
Hmm.
body systems. But it was just, I mean, I was like head down, thought the pills were the answer. And the one like there was one experience that happened, and this was later in my career. So I worked for Pfizer for 9 years. And the one thing that started to kind of wake me up was I remember at one point, and I had sold Lipitor, which is a statin for high cholesterol. And at one point, this data came out, and it was talking about how there's this connection, or maybe this connection to statins and dementia. And it makes sense. I
Hmm.
mean, we're lowering the cholesterol, our brain.
Hmm.
It's like, so
Hmm.
instead of stepping back as a company and thinking, okay, like what is going on? Like, let's put the people first and figure out, is this right? Is this not? It was like this, okay, go. We gotta like, all right, sales, come on in. Here's our sales messaging. We've got to disprove this study,
Hmm.
and we've got to like go out there and
Wow.
convince the doctors that we still need to do this and it isn't the statins causing this. And I'm like, and
Wow.
that was like my first taste of like, this doesn't feel right.
Interesting. So it as we all know, it all comes down to the money. It's all about the marketing and not about the science. Like, can we make this better? Can we still make a medicine that helps with high blood pressure, right? But
High cholesterol, which now
high
we know.
cholesterol, sorry,
Yeah.
but doesn't lead to Alzheimer's. Like, surely there's a way we can let's spend some money on the science, but no, instead we're going to spend the money on the marketing and keep the money flowing. Wow.
Yeah. And so that was kind of like my first, I guess, like getting my feet wet a little bit of this whole like profits over health mentality,
Hmm.
which then
I
fast.
think it's interesting. Kudos to you, though, that it really struck a chord with you because being caught up in it, and you probably liked the marketing end of it. I like marketing. There's a lot of fun to marketing, if you're, especially if you're using it the right way. Kudos to you that you didn't just get caught up in it and go, oh, yeah, how do we convince people that this isn't a problem,
Well, I mean, in all fairness, it didn't feel right, it didn't sit right, but I was in a situation where, I was in my previous marriage, I guess you could say the breadwinner, and, just a lot of pressure to make sure that
Yeah.
payment got paid and, this and that, and so it's almost like pharmaceutical sales are like the golden handcuff because they paid you so well that it was just
Mm,
really hard to just kind of walk away and scary to walk away. That was my first job. And so I wish I could say that I
mm,
left at that moment, but eventually what had happened, and I started to talk with a company. I'm like, I can't sell a pill that helps with overactive bladder when you can just simply change the foods you're eating and your lifestyle, and it's going to just take care of itself on its own.
yeah.
And then that happened for me too. I started doing yoga while I was working for Pfizer. And that's where it really clicked for me of like, no, food is the real medicine.
Mm,
And, at that point, that's when I really started to wake up. And it's just like, this doesn't feel right anymore. But I
mm.
mean, I
Now, up
was,
until then, were you still eating a processed diet pretty much?
yeah, I
You
was
were.
still,
Okay.
yeah, like, counting calories,
Mhm.
trying to,
Avoiding all fat at all cost, right?
of course, avoiding fat, still thought egg yolks were
Oh,
scary.
egg yolks, evil, yeah.
Oh, I did the vegan thing for a while. Oh my gosh, I did you ever get onto that kick of, like, being a vegan, or
N I did not
you did
actually,
not?
that's the one thing I did not.
Okay. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
did, for about 6 months and just saw my
Wow.
health decline. My skin turned kinda gray, started to break out a
Wow.
ton, low energy, and it was actually my family that was like, "We don't think this is working for you, Haley," and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think you're right." But, yeah, I mean, a lot of these experiences just kind of led me down this path of, like, food is the real medicine. I mean, I was
Yeah.
on, like, medicines for migraines and,
Mm,
taking some for occasional acne. It was just feeling like, bloated,
interesting.
brain fog, and then you change your diet, and this stuff that we just consider kind of normal as we age
Yeah.
goes away, and you're like, "Wait,
Yeah.
what?" So,
Yeah. So
it's amazing.
because when you are a pharmaceutical salesman, do you actually tend to take more medicine yourself? Is that kind of just the way it goes?
I feel like you do. Like, I remember at one point, gosh, I've not even, like, shared this with a lot of people, but, like, I just remember feeling really just kind of, like, sluggish, and it was just, there's a lot of stress in that job, and, you're
Yeah.
always trying to hit your numbers, and it was just go, 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 go.
Yeah.
Um, and then you would hear all these, like, you would talk with other drug reps, and you'd hear these new medicines, and at one point, I can't remember what it was, but it was some sort of, uh like a happy pill. It was some sort of, like, antidepressant or something like that.
Mhm.
I wasn't even depressed, but I'm like, but you hear all this stuff from the marketing team of, like, "It gives you a great
Mm.
boost of energy, and it makes you feel so great," and so I was like,
Oh.
even, like, just randomly took that short term, so I'm like, "What am I
Wow.
doing?" Like, kind of just, like, à la carte, like, "Yeah, I
Wow.
want this," and you get very jaded, and, you just don't
Mm.
think about kind of the bigger picture of, like, medicines. I talk a lot about, like, foods and ingredients having certain, like, toxins in them or just things that aren't good for our body. Well, it's the same with medicines. You know what I
For
mean? There's lots
sure.
of toxins in medicines that we need to be careful about. All these side effects, it's not as simple as just, "Oh, just take a pill and don't worry about it anymore."
For sure. I
Yeah.
actually had a nutritionist on a while back on the podcast. In fact, I'll link that episode in the show notes for anyone who would like to listen. It was really fascinating because she had her degree, a really great one from a great school in nutrition, but she started realizing there were things happening, like a friend of hers, I believe, who changed her diet and all of a sudden her acne was clearing up.
Mm.
And she's like, no one ever told me there was a correlation between acne and your food. Like she was like shocked. And
Mm.
things like that made her realize she really needed to study holistic nutrition and dietitian, and it's amazing that and she also points out like don't give your doctor too hard of don't be too hard of a critic sometimes because a lot of times the doctors themselves have not been schooled in this and they have been schooled and taught a pill is your best solution and they don't even know sometimes how it's
Yes.
all connected.
That's so true. So my husband is a physician. He's a surgeon and a urologist, and thankfully functionally trained and thinks different from most doctors. So at 21, starting at Pfizer, I mean, I spent pretty much all of my working years with physicians. And so I learned quickly on, like, they're not all physicians. I came in like putting them all up on this pedestal of like
Yeah.
they're great, they know everything, and you quickly learn that they're just regular people like us. But it got to the point where I'm like, I could never marry a physician because I just don't like the way they think. And so my
Mm,
husband's very, very different,
mhm.
and really tries to have that conversation with as many patients that will listen. And he said, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, more and more people, it used to be where it's like, if you didn't give them a pill, they got really upset. Like they wanted the antibiotic,
Yes.
or they wanted that.
Yes.
I had one physician that I also thought was doing good, but he would give like an allergy pill. He's like, "What's the closest thing to a sugar pill that I could give them?" Because if they walk out of the office and they don't have a pill, they're mad and they don't come back,
Mm,
they think you didn't fix them. So he would
yeah.
have those tough my husband would have those conversations where it's just like, "No, honestly, like, the best thing for you is to not be on this medicine, for me to give you nothing." Or I
Mhm.
mean, even a couple times he's like, "The best advice I could give you," because 'cause he'd have, like, these 70, 80-year-olds that are coming in, and they're like, "Doc,
Mm,
I'm going to the bathroom, like, twice a night." And he's like, "So am I." He's like, "Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't go see doctors," because then they'll put you on these pills, and then, that causes, like, different things, and it's just like a cascade
yeah,
of events but anyways, back to your
yeah,
point, my husband will be the first to say, they didn't get hardly any training in nutrition. Um,
yeah.
and then here we are, this is who we're taking our nutritional advice from, which is crazy.
It really is. And
Yeah.
I think you're right when you kinda hinted on the fact that sometimes we're at fault too. Like, we want a quick solution. We go in as a patient and we wanna walk out of there with the solution. We don't wanna be told, "Well, it might take you a year of this changing of your diet and avoiding this and getting more sleep, and maybe in about a year you'll see a change." We don't wanna hear that. We wanna
Yeah.
walk out, go buy something at the pharmacy and say, "Okay, in a week, I'm gonna be all better."
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it comes back to what I said in the beginning about, like, food doesn't have to be convenient. That's not the most important thing about our food, and it's the same thing with our health. It doesn't have to be a quick, convenient fix. We want the best fix. So
yeah.
I love it that he's involved with your brand. I know he's on Instagram and he shares a lot, and I love that because we need more holistic doctors' outlook, I think, in our lives, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'll just end with one thing that I love that he like often comments on is that his farmers, it talks about, just not having the conveniences. His
Mhm.
farmers are some of his healthiest patients. And when you think about
Mm.
it, these are the guys and the gals that are outside in nature. They're
Yep.
getting the morning sun, they're getting the sun. They're working
They're
with their
getting their hands in the dirt, and they're getting them in
exactly
the dirt. Yep. Yep.
physical, and if the farmers are not growing like the corn and the soy, but they're more like growing the foods that they're eating, those are some
Yeah.
of his healthiest patients. And I
Mm.
think it's like you said, I mean, it could be simple, it could be some simple changes, get outside more, connect more, change your
Yeah.
diet up, ditch the ultra processed foods, prioritize your sleep, and those are golden. You do those
Yeah.
things and you'll be a different person, like you said, and probably quicker than a year.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think that I mean, maybe even within a few weeks or a month, you really start to notice. Although I do think our minds play tricks on us and we're like, well, gee, I think I have more energy, but that can't be right. Like, I can't really have more energy just because of that one thing I did. Back to what I know we first said we wanted to talk about with kids. How do we set our kids up for success so they don't have this never ending wrong mindset that we grew up on and that we're used to as far as medical intervention and, of course, all the processed food? How do we set our kids up for successful eating?
So I think, and this is just my opinion. I have 3 kids that I've birthed of my own, and I think some of the things that we can think about as parents. Well, the first is, if you're thinking about conceiving, it starts with your own health and actually your husband's health too. And so, really cleaning up your own diet before you want to get pregnant is
Mm,
just is really important. And I
mm,
think oftentimes we have this misconception that, oh, I'm pregnant, I can just eat whatever I want because I'm going to gain
mhm.
weight. And I feel like that's, like, fed to us some way through, like, Big Food and some of the dietitians and stuff. I just feel
Yeah,
like it's a sneaky narrative that's kinda entered into our mind, very with a purposely from, like, the people that can stand to benefit from that. But I think,
I agree.
you know I mean, it's sad when you think about it, but that isn't the case. I feel like we're growing a baby, and so that's probably the most important time that we are really being mindful of the things that we are eating and putting into our bodies, um, because that all affects how our baby is. And I
And it
all
affects us. I mean, when you're pregnant, if you're not eating well, the baby might be okay in the end because it's going to take all the best of what you were giving, but your
Mhm.
body's going to be so depleted.
That's so true. That's such a good point, Michelle. I know, and I think about too, like, I remember I had some friends that were pregnant, and it's like, now I'm pregnant, so I gotta be really careful, and, like, I'm just gonna go for, like, a light walk. And I'm like, "Wait, I was doing hot yoga when I had my son was my
Yeah.
first, and I had been doing it prior, and I felt amazing, especially mentally.
Yeah.
I mean, I exercise for
Yeah.
my mental health, and
Yeah, I
I'm just
agree.
like, "I'm gonna keep on doing this." Like, we know our bodies, and I would go to the morning classes when it wouldn't get very hot, and, like, if I felt myself heating up a little, I would, excuse myself from the room, but I kept on, and then sure enough, here comes this research saying that, like, exercise is amazing for the baby's health, for our health. So it's
Yeah.
just like all this stuff we're told. So, I mean, we could probably talk forever on that. But,
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like taking care of your own health when you're pregnant. But then once you have your kid, some of the things that I've noticed at least is that I think their taste buds, like the first 3 years are critical. And if we can go those 3 years with just giving them real food, like my
Mm,
kids would eat things like, I mean, just crazy, like sardines or,
mm,
just I'm trying to think of some of the stuff that people would just be like, "Wait, what are they eating?" But
mm.
they don't know any better and their taste buds are developing and they like all these different tastes. And
Yeah.
so kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like the like tarnished tongue, your kids will eat anything. But the problem is that you walk down the baby aisle at a grocery store and you see things like the puffs and
Mm,
the pouches, and a lot of them. Now there are some small companies that are doing good things, but a lot of them have natural flavors in them. And I feel like the minute you expose your kids to natural flavors, it's like the fourth largest ingredient or the most prominent ingredient in foods today.
yeah.
Um, but the minute you expose your kids to a natural flavor, they're hands down going to pick that flavor over real food,
Mm,
because real blueberries can't compete with these food scientists that
yeah.
are spending all this time and money in the lab to develop a flavor that is their sole purpose is like to be addicting, to be so
Absolutely.
good that like it lingers a little bit and then you want more. I
Mhm.
mean, like, they're hijacking our kids' taste buds, so if
Yeah.
you can protect them for those first 3 years, I feel like
Mm,
that is huge. That is huge,
mm.
and I was able to do that for my son, and my son will eat anything. I mean, I'm, like, chopping up onions, and he's going by and picking up an onion. There's not one thing that he isn't open to trying. It just makes it easy. He eats what
Mm,
we eat, and dinner is easy. Meals are easy. Um, I do
yeah.
feel like in that, like, kind of bucket is limiting, or like, I know this may sound extreme, but like holding off on the things like the pasta and the bread. Because the
Mm,
minute you introduce those, your kids are going to want those too. So if you can kind of limit that back and just think like, quality animal proteins, quality fruits, quality veggies, healthy fats, olives and coconut oil. And I mean, just sticks of butter is great, pastured butter,
mhm.
eggs, all of that stuff that's just so nutrient dense, and try to feed that in the first 3 years, like, you'll see a huge difference in your kids. With my second and my third, what happens naturally is just eventually, like, the kids, like, we make bread or we have pasta, and then they get exposed to it, and then it's like, well, that's what they really want. Like, I don't want the green beans anymore, I want pasta again.
Right.
So, I feel
Right.
like that was another key that I've noticed, at least, is, like, you can just hold it off or just not always having it in the house. Like, maybe it's a once a week thing where you buy a loaf of bread
Mhm.
or make your sourdough, and then it's like, "Okay, we got it. We're gone until the next week." Um,
Mhm.
and just really, like, just making available all those real foods. I feel like it just makes a huge difference then down the road in what your kids eat.
Yeah. And also, I mean, spending time if you are having the pasta and the bread, spending the time I don't know. I think you have a nice theory there. I don't know if I would eliminate the breads just because we are a bread heavy family, but it's all completely whole grain. It's all freshly milled flour. I haven't purchased that enriched white flour from the store in probably 9 months. We are completely all fresh milled. So, I think there is a difference there, if you're gonna be making your pasta and your bread versus, buying at the store.
I think that's a great point, and actually you inspired me to get a grain mill. So I did
Are
get
you
one.
serious? I was gonna tell you, I thought I saw a grain mill in the background on Instagram. I was
Yeah,
gonna ask you.
you were the total inspiration. I've been thinking about it,
I
thinking about
love it.
And then after that giveaway we did, I'm like, "I'm gonna do it."
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that's a great, I think that's a great clarifier or a great differentiator. Unfortunately, most people don't have access to that.
I
And so
agree.
when you're
Yes.
milling it yourself, that's totally it's a different story. It's so much where I have to
Yeah.
like sift it now a little bit when I'm baking because there's the whole like
You
grain in
wanna
there.
take a little bit of bran out to get it finer, yeah.
Exactly. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, we love einkorn, and so even prior to the grain mill, like we would even things like pancakes. I mean, you can make those very healthy for your kids. Put in yogurt or eggs or butter and good
yeah,
flour. I think that's all wonderful. Yeah, it's more of like the store bread or like the hamburger buns and that you
yeah,
buy at the store. That's the
yeah,
tricky stuff that you may just consider like not bringing into bringing into the house all the time.
yeah.
Um,
And also back to the idea of making your own pasta and bread, if the kids are invested in it and they're also helping you make it, there's so many things I'm thinking of. Like, first of all, they are gonna value the food more. It's
Mhm.
not gonna be shove it in my face and fill myself up. It's gonna be that just took 45 minutes of rolling that out and making it. It was really cool and it was fun. But wow, I really value this food more. And I think we almost savor it more. You know what I mean?
think
Which
you're
I
so
think,
spot on. I think that there's so much I mean, even just, like, baking with your kids, um,
mhm.
the amount that I mean, them learning to read ingredients, them working on their
Oh,
math
the
skills.
math going on for sure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and I absolutely agree. When the kids make it themselves, they're, like, way more likely to eat it themselves too.
Yes.
It's just, like,
Yes.
good for kids. I
And they
feel
get the added dopamine because they're literally hands-on being creative. Like, that's one more reason to do it, you know?
Yeah, exactly, where
Yeah.
those fine motor skills, the delayed
Yes.
gratification of, like, we don't just,
Yes.
like, want a piece of bread and then boop, there it is. No, we've
You're
gotta,
right.
like, make it and then let it cool and,
Yes.
all that. And then even, like, because we do a lot of baking at our house, like homemade cookies and cakes, and then just even, like, sharing it, that just feels so good of, like, "I made this, and then I'm gonna save some for grandma and papa when they come over later," or something like that.
Totally,
It's a whole
totally.
beautiful thing,
It
and we
really
just
is. There's so much involved. I think we could spend, like, an hour just talking about that one thing about
yeah.
how does it really help kids to actually be involved in the process of making their food. There's so many avenues you could go down and so many great reasons to do it.
Yeah.
Um Also, I like the fact that you pointed out you cut off at 3 years. Like, I mean, there's we could talk more about what you do after the 3 years, but one thing about that age cutoff is I feel like in most cases, in most families, you have a lot, if not 100% of
Mhm.
control
Mhm.
over the kid's environment. So they're not old enough that they're going to a friend's house,
Mhm.
where they're even knowing there is such a thing as goldfish. Like you said, there is the playground, that there is that a little bit. But at that age, they're looking to mom for the answers. They're not going to really, care a lot about that goldfish if mom's like, no, we don't do that, and they move
Mhm.
on.
Yeah, and you bring your own snack, right? You come prepared knowing that there's
Right.
gonna be families with other snacks, and you just bring good stuff that they like. So maybe it's a homemade
Yeah.
granola bar or, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and it's like, "No, we eat this." And I've not had them push back at all. It's like you said, they just kind of
Hmm.
follow their mom up until that point, I feel like. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
easier to do as well.
For sure. So
Yeah.
I think I saw you talking about grandparents specifically. There is a point that they're going to be going to the grandparents' house. They're going to be going over to a friend's house, and they are going to be offered stuff that they've never had before. That you really would rather them not eat. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I think I know I'm super grateful in the sense that both my parents are divorced. So I've got my dad and stepmom and my mom and stepdad, and they both are very respectful of our food choices. And so,
That's
I
awesome.
just stress like that is extremely important. And so, something easy because for them, it's like, for example, my stepmom the other day, my daughter was over there and she really wanted the cheese. And I'm like, what is in this cheese that she just wants so bad? So of course she saw it. So I'm like, give her the cheese. And then moving forward, like let's just I'll bring my own cheese next time. And so
Right.
so my stepmom like went out of her way and she's like, I went to the store and I got organic cheese. And what do you think about this? And so, I see that it's like organic cheese, but then it has like caramel coloring in it. And I'm like, why is
Oh,
caramel
wow.
in the cheese? And so
So unneeded.
I
So
know
unneeded.
it's so frustrating, and it's just like she made the effort, she spent the extra money, so I'm just
Oh,
like,
wow.
that's fine, I feel like when they're at grandma and grandpa's, it's like, what, like, maybe 5% of the time, if that. So it's like
Yeah.
after you've really protected their taste buds at the age of 3, and then it's just like a little bit, I just don't want the stress of trying to control everything. I don't want them to feel my stress. And so I'm
Yeah.
kind of like I'm quite a bit more relaxed. Now, they know like no Oreos, no Doritos, none of that stuff. But like,
Mhm.
a cheese that's organic with food coloring, okay, or caramel coloring.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
like, and then I just have the conversation. I'm like, here's what I do. And I just flip it over and I look at the ingredients and I see caramel and I'm frustrated by this. And she's like, oh, that's good to know. And so you turn into a teaching
Mhm.
opportunity. And
Yeah,
yeah, but I
for
try not
sure.
to, just like when there are birthday parties or even just outside the house, not control too much. But I do draw the line on certain things.
Mhm.
So, yeah, like, I mean, artificial food dyes are a hard one for me, especially for my 3-year-old now, my 6 and 9-year-old, like, they're gonna eat those sometimes, and I just
Yeah.
encourage them to check in with their bodies, like, "Okay, you just had, red velvet cake. It obviously had red food coloring in it. How do you feel?" And my son, it affects him a lot, and it affects
Right.
him, like, how he sleeps, he'll get night terrors, and then also
Mhm.
just like, "Oh, I can't control myself." And I just make that connection for him. And so I'm like, just know that, this causes this. And so you have a choice. And maybe you choose to do that again. Maybe you don't like how you feel and you'll avoid that. And oftentimes, not always, but often he's like, we'll just scrape off like the food coloring or whatever it is. Cause he's just
Right.
like, I don't like the way this makes me feel. And just is like, I'm not
Yeah.
eating, and just, he'll just
Yeah.
do it and move on. No big deal.
Yeah.
So,
And I
yes.
think once you've gotten into a habit of doing that, it might not be so hard. I think in the beginning, to be honest, it's not easy for a parent to make that connection themselves and to remember, oh, an hour ago they had that cupcake. You might not always, be quite aware of it. But if you're able to, I think it gets easier, first of all, as time goes on. Second of all, we really are educating our children better than those medical doctors we were talking about a little bit,
Mhm.
and they're just naturally learning this. And of course, that's the best way to learn it because it's a very personal thing. So they're going to remember it more.
I think that's so well said. I think again, it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning is that kids are just so much more smarter than we give them credit for. And
Yeah.
it's really easy as a parent to be like, no, don't eat that. I don't want you eating that. Versus like taking a little extra time to just be like, listen, here's why I don't want you to eat it. Like these food colorings they're actually banned in other countries.
Yeah.
And, they come here and some states have warning labels on them because they just cause kids to feel like really like upset and angry. And so unfortunately they are in our foods, but the good thing is that we can kind of look out for these. And so now, my kids will turn it around and like read what's in the packages and stuff. And it's not forced and it's not, I feel like some people are like, oh, you're going to create eating disorders and anxious kids.
No.
No. I mean, I think it's the opposite. Like they're learning for themselves and they're seeing how it affects their body and they're making intuitive choices, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
And I can see why people would say that to give them credit. I do understand why they would be worried that maybe this is going to cause too much obsession with food for the kid. But on the other hand, it's really not our fault as a loving parent who's concerned about the health of our child that the food industry has gone to the extent they have. Like, we have to safeguard them at some point from big food.
Mhm. Yeah, I think my husband will use the analogy. It's like we wouldn't let a kid touch a hot stove. That's our job to
Wow.
protect them from that. It's also, unfortunately, we're living in a world where we do have to protect them from a lot of the food that's out there because this food is designed to be overeaten and it's going to leave you, you know, undernourished, overfed, and in a predicament down the road that you're just not gonna want to be in health
Yeah.
wise.
Yeah. So you mentioned one great tip. If the kids are going somewhere that maybe you're not going to be there with them, or you just know that maybe it's not the kind of food you eat, one thing is you can send food along for sure. You can pack up a yummy snack. You can even have you help make the dessert that they're going to take with them. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have grandparents in their lives, in-laws or parents like yours. Do you have any more tips for us for the parents who they know when the kids go to grandma and granddad's, they don't respect their choices and granddad loves his Oreos. And, I don't know. Do you have any more tips? I don't know what I would do, honestly, with little
Hmm.
kids in a situation like that.
Yeah. I mean, it would be pretty awful if you're straight up saying like, "Hey, I don't want my kids to have these foods," and then they're giving them to the kids behind your back. Man,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to it's one of those things where I think I know what I would do, but if I'd have to really be in that situation,
Mhm.
I feel like for
Okay, so
me.
with in-laws or parents, you would have that discussion, obviously, and hopefully they would respect it. What about the families that like the neighbors? You know, the kids go over to the neighbor's house because they're outside playing, and the neighbor has no idea, that you don't eat Oreos or whatever. Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that? Like, do you
You
prepare the
know,
kids ahead of time or
yeah, I think the one thing that comes to my mind is that I don't want to also, I mean, shoot, we were just talking about how we grew up on that food. Now, I do feel like the food is way different than the food we grew up on.
true?
I
It
mean,
has
just
gotten
look
worse
at
for sure.
yeah, I mean, look at McDonald's French fries. They were used to be cooked in beef tallow and salt. And now there's
Yeah.
like, I don't know,
Yep.
26 ingredients in a McDonald's French fry. I mean,
And
so
so addictive.
oh, I know. So we can't make that argument that like we grew up on
Mhm.
it, so it's okay that you did.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah.
but that said, a couple times is not gonna kill the kid. So I think
Yeah.
about with my ex. So I'm co-parenting with my ex-husband. Unfortunately, when we were married, he was on board. And then it kind of became a thing where we got divorced and that's just a whole other story. But
I know.
long story short, to spare all the
Processed
details.
food tastes better, and he likes what tastes better. I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Look,
they're getting more of that food over there. But what the really interesting thing is that, I think just having the and it's a fine line, right? I don't wanna shame their dad. I don't want to,
right.
shame the food that he's serving them because they're still
Yeah.
young and they don't have that much control. So I try to be very,
Well,
very mindful of that. But just when we're here and just having the conversations of why we're eating the food we're eating, not necessarily like shaming the other food, but again, getting them to think for themselves of like, okay,
I
so
love
this
that.
food has this ingredients and it comes from more of a factory versus this food comes from nature and it just tastes better and like, getting them to make those connections. But then the other thing is like with my son, so he's 9, my daughter's 6, and I don't think she understands yet. I think she goes over there and just will eat whatever is served to her. But what's
Mhm.
interesting is my son is starting now to see the difference. And like, for example, he had a soccer tournament this past weekend, and we were like leading up into that date. I was like, oh, you're over at our house this weekend for your soccer tournament. And he's just like, yes. He's like, Mom, I want to make sure I
Fun.
eat some raw milk. I would love some grass fed meat. And I really want to like stay hydrated with some frozen fruit. And it was just, he was so excited because he connected. I'm going to perform better at soccer and I just need the good food. And he was really excited about eating that over at our house and like knowing he's going to be
I
a
love that. I really love that.
and he kind of it wasn't like, it never was like "Oh, your dad's giving you this junk," but it's more of like you just take the high road and you just keep on telling them. And the other thing too is like, finding good athletes. Like a lot of the good soccer players, like they talk about a lot of this food
Mhm.
that they eat and making sure I'm showing him those videos or talking to him about that. And I thought that was
Well,
great. It's like, okay, stay the course because they will. So to answer your question, a very long answer, like if they go over to the neighbors, I mean, if it's something you just can't control, then let them do their thing. And then I feel like when they come back, you just kind of check in like, "Did you eat Cheetos over there? Okay, so how's your belly feel now? Or how do you
good
feel?"
mom.
And if it's a kid that's mostly eating real whole foods, they're going to see a difference with how they feel with
Mhm.
that other food. Oh, wow. You could say something like, wow, you just ate that and now you're hungry like an hour later. Isn't that interesting? Whereas like if you ate like a hamburger for dinner, I'm very like meat focused, I feel like in this conversation, but you ate whatever veggies with your butter, like that sustains you a lot longer. And just
Yeah.
drawing those connections for them to see. Because whatever you say, it's entering in their brain. Even if they act like they're not paying attention. I feel like they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I think your son is like proving exactly what we were thinking and talking about a little bit earlier that if you stay the course and you just patiently, long road, keep helping them understand and showing them the value of real food, it's going to, all the dots are all going to connect and they're
Mm.
going to get to the point that that's what they want and that's what they crave. And it also reminded me when you said that about your son that he was happy to be in your house. Like, I when I want to really focus on a certain thing, like I'm avoiding X from my diet or whatever it is, I really love it when my husband's in on it,
Mhm.
and we're agreeing, okay, we're going to work and we're going to do this together. It's just so much better. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like your son just was like, "Oh, good. I have a team around me that's going to help me really eat the best that I can this weekend."
Yeah.
What a
I
great thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great point too. I do. And again, it's just like they'll make the connections on their own, but we as parents have to make sure that we're like connecting those dots for them. And I think that's why early on, it starts with just all the positives of food. And we just started a garden, and I think that's a beautiful way to expose kids to food. And even if it's just like an herb garden, like I did
Okay.
podcast the other day with one of my favorite holistic pediatricians, and she's just talking about gut health. And, she said you want to try to get like 30 different, different plants, fruits, veggies, chickpea, different fibers into your diet each week. And every single herb is different and it counts as a different one. And so even
Yep.
just, growing the herb garden, my kids are out there just like picking the mint and just eating it and just
Yeah.
like, they wouldn't do it if I got it from a grocery store and it was sitting in the fridge, like, in the thing, but it's out there
Yep.
and it's, like, they're hot and it's like, "Oh, I wanna taste this," and then my three-year-old sees their older ones doing it and she's like, "Oh, I wanna try it too," and so she picks it and that all counts,
Mhm.
and then it's like, "Hey, guys, like, what should we cook with tonight? Basil. Will you go out and grab some basil?" And then it's like they chop it and then we put it on, and, just something as simple as an easy herb garden is a great way to start to just teach kids where our food comes from and expose them to different scents and smells and tastes and all the stuff.
Very
Tomato
good point.
Yeah.
And it can be done in containers, herbs, tomato plants, pepper plants. You can grow them in a pot on your balcony in the city. So there's no reason not to do it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would love to pick your brain more on that. Like, what do I do in the winter? Because you're much more of an expert on herbs than I am.
Well, I don't know about expert, but I love herbs for sure. And what you said about how they each have a different nutrient profile, just want to throw this in there. Same thing for wheat berries, by the way.
Mm.
Once you get experience with your grain mill, you can start mixing and matching and throwing in different wheat berries, and you're changing up the nutrient quality of your bread and pasta and whatever you're making every time you do that. So it's just amazing. Real food is amazing, and it gets me happy and excited every time I think about details like that.
Yeah, it gets me so happy and exciting too. And it's one of those things where it's like you just, you're on the course and you're at the grocery store and you're just trusting everything off the shelf. And it just takes that one thing to kind of come around and just kind of shake you a little bit to be like, whoa, whoa. And then it's just like, once you know, then there's really no turning back. And that's the thing is like, it's funny how we're weird if we like eat healthy real foods. Like, "Oh, that's weird." When it's like, "Wait, what?" But, the reality is that it's so good, and once you can kind of veer away from the ultra processed foods and get on this real whole foods diet, it's such a beautiful thing. I think one of the most exciting things is that you're not being controlled by the food anymore. Yeah, ultra processed
Mm,
foods are literally designed, with a seed oil and a refined cheap sugar to be put together to be created very addicting or a natural flavor. And you don't really understand when you're full, when you're not. It's easy to overeat.
yeah.
You don't feel good. And it's empty calories, so you're eating again. Versus you go to this real one ingredient foods. It's like our body knows what to do with that, and we naturally feel full and satiated. And sustain till the next meal. And we digest the food so easily and we just have this great energy. And so, yes, real food is amazing. I totally echo
It
what you're
is.
saying.
Yep,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. Well, you have really kind of helped me walk through some things and some thoughts about, the real food and kids. And I'm very thankful. My daughter actually is very much on the bandwagon. She also has a grain mill. Her and I are sharing recipes all the time. So I don't have any concerns about my granddaughters, but it's a really interesting thought that I just really haven't walked through about real food and kids. And I'm really glad you were able to come on and we could talk about this today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just something I'm so passionate about because I feel like all kids deserve real food and they really don't know any better and they can't make that decision for themselves when they're young.
Yeah.
And it's our job as parents. And I feel like it's probably one of the most important jobs that we have is like, exposing our kids and feeding our kids the, home cooked meals when we can and the real food, because they grow up on this diet. 70% of a kid's diet is ultra processed foods. That is only setting them up for failure down the road. And I even think about it long term of like, yeah, you may be like the quote unquote bad guy, or the weird parent that's like, we make our meals at home and we, grow our most of our own food, or we do. But I promise you, like, your kids will thank you down the road when they're 15, 16. I see it with my stepkids. And it's just like,
Yeah.
they will thank you. It may be weird, it may be uncomfortable, and it may be, mom, I want to eat what my neighbors are eating, but stay the course, because they will, when they're healthier, and they're not plagued by these chronic diseases in their
Yeah.
early 20s, they will thank you for it. I mean, it's like that's our job as a parent, if we know.
Right, for sure, for sure. And they're also going to thank you for an appreciation of real food, because they're going to be happy that they can be excited about their food, like we were just talking about. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Haley. Where can people find you?
So like you said, I am on, it's funny, I got off of social media and then we launched these books and now I'm back on social
Oh,
media. So you can find me at My Superhero Foods on Instagram. We also have a website. My husband writes a lot of great articles and there's a lot of great resources on there. That's just mysuperherofoods.com. Like I mentioned, we authored a couple children's books. So if you don't mind, I'd love to just kind of share
yeah,
those. Um,
yeah.
this is our OG, so this is our original talking about my superhero foods. And
Yep.
it's a long book, but it goes through and like all the superfoods or most of the superfoods, connects them with powers. And it's like all the things that we value too for kids. They're, like they're at the farmers market, their kids are outside, they're playing, they're maybe barefoot, they're running around. And
Yeah,
it's just in a subtle way exposing your kids to real food and connecting it to the power. And I just feel like, reading this, there's so much power in reading books in general, but just,
agree.
quality books, over and over again, this enters into their brains. And it's just another way to expose them to real food. And then we have a
Yep.
sleep book. I love this one because a lot of times parents will read it and they'll be like, I just stole a bunch of good tips from you on this. But again, like walks kids through like the importance of sleep, like why you wanna get sleep, and then just kinda like what you could do throughout the day to set your kids up for good sleep. And then we have a couple books for parents too, if you're interested, avoiding seed oils in your kitchen, and then also a breakfast guide. So, this one talks about like how to get nourishing, easy breakfast on the table for your kids in the morning instead of like Lucky Charms, and
I
how
love it.
that differentiator really sets them up for success. So you can find all of our books on Amazon and then also on our website as well.
Awesome. I love it. And for anybody who wasn't watching on YouTube while Haley was talking about her books, the two kids' books are picture books. So it's to sit down and read with your kid. They can flip through, look at the pictures, and be inspired to eat real food. Thank you
Mhm.
so much, Haley.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me on. Thanks for all you're doing too.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I've known Haley for a little while. We've worked together on a project over on Instagram, and I've been following her over there for a while. But this was the first time I actually got to sit down and talk to her. And it was even more fun than I anticipated. And we have even more in common than I knew. So it was fun. I hope it was fun for you too. Thanks for listening, guys. Be sure to go to solelyrested.com/beef to take advantage of that amazing offer on grass fed and finished beef delivered right to your door with free shipping. So remember, guys, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy those simple everyday efforts. It's not easy, but it's a good life.